Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next, answers to your questions about effort, training on a treadmill, enduring hard workouts, and more. And after that, World of Running updates about tons of crazy fast performances. Welcome back. Glad to be with you again. Especially glad to have Andy back for the whole thing with us again. I know you were just dreading having to listen to Zach again solo, so
I'm sure they didn't mind.
Oh,
but I'm glad to be back.
And it happens to also be our favorite episode of the month, where we're going to answer your questions. And by the way, if you weren't already aware, you can submit a question anytime to be answered at the end of month Q&A episode by going to AtoZrunning.com/question.
Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to meet some DC runners, some very friendly DC runners when I was there for a work trip in Washington, D.C. And I was able to run with happy trail runners. And I wanted to give you all a shout out because you're super nice to include me and to allow me to join you. I didn't know that other runners don't like to run with runners sometimes, if that makes any sense at all. So my first attempt didn't work out.
So some runners are not real runners.
No, they just
They're pretend
They
runners.
just want to run by themselves like Zach.
I see your point now.
No, but it was great. A special shout out to Tim, whose coach was my roommate at the Olympic trials, Katie Kellner. So small world. That was really cool.
Good things, which means all of you should be listening right now so that you can hear these wonderful shout outs. And if some of you are listening and some of your friends weren't, you should send the link to the podcast so that they can.
That'd be nice. That'd be very nice of you.
Speaking of very nice things, Chad from Texas wrote to us to share what was a very nice thing. And we so appreciate when you all send us notes to express to us how things that we're talking about might relate or help you in various ways. It's always cool. But Chad wrote, your podcast has been a steady source of encouraging stories and wisdom for the last nearly 2 years that I've been listening. Well, long-time listener. Thanks, Chad. He said, I took up running about 6 years ago just to stay active with my family. And guess what? Finished my first marathon last month with my kids and continue to enjoy running.
Oh, that's awesome, Chad.
So good.
Congrats.
Yeah, and Chad, his wife runner, and his 2 kids running in high school.
That's
so this
cool.
is just like the family thing. We are jealous, Chad. We are jealous of you and your family.
Thanks for letting us know that, too.
Very cool. All right, well, now speaking of fun family opportunities to run together, yes, indeed, I just did that. Rivertown Races does have many distances, which often lends itself to different family members who don't want to do one thing over another. You have some choices. So if you and your family are looking for a race opportunity, or just you, doesn't have to be anyone else with you.
They can come cheer you on.
They can do that too. Or if you don't want your family to anything to do with your running, you can do it by yourself. The point here is Rivertown Races price is going up. Chances are while you're listening to this, because it goes up on January 31st. They're going to do a couple more price increases between now and the end of April when the race is. So if you're thinking about an April race, whether it's a focus race for your season or just one in a mix of things going on, April 22 is a great opportunity to run a 5K, 10K, or half marathon. And you can do so for another 24 hours-ish, depending on when you're listening to this, at the current price. And so take full advantage of that with 10% off when you register with code AtoZ10. And
that's not expiring when the price goes up.
No,
so you
that
can still
never
get a
expires.
discount. You don't have to feel sad if you miss that cutoff because you can still register and get 10% off.
RivertownRaces.com to register, to learn more about anything else that they have going on. Or if you're registered and you would like to receive the complimentary training support that's available to anyone registered for the race, we provided it, and so that certainly is a connection there too. And we offer 50% off a custom training plan personalized for you as well. But again, you have to be registered to take full advantage.
And we didn't say the code for the discount on
did.
the race. AtoZ10.
I said that.
You did say? Okay, well,
but
I'm
we
just
should
reiterating
say it again. What code? AtoZ10.
AtoZ10. Well, now,
all good things.
Speaking of good things, we have some of your questions coming right up.
Well, we've got a great collection of questions today. One of the things I like about the question segment, if I haven't already told you enough that I like it, is that the questions tend to be related to similar topics to things that we've talked about or that you've asked about in the past, but with precise nuance. And so we get to go into an answer that we wouldn't have thought to share or wouldn't have necessarily included in a previous conversation about these topics. That's one of the reasons why this is an important segment, because context matters when we're thinking about what's the best thing to do and the right thing to do when that may be the answer. So we've got some interesting ones here and some interesting nuances that have not been addressed in the past.
Not specifically.
Like GPS technology in watches. That'll be fun.
First question is from Carol, and Carol is from Missouri, and she's having some treadmill troubles.
You, Carol, and everybody else who runs on a treadmill.
There are so many concerns surrounding the treadmill, but we're going to dive into some specificity when it comes to maybe some form and stiffness. This is Carol's question. My question concerns running on the treadmill. I prefer running outside and will do so unless the weather won't permit. Late December, we had what most of the country had, frigid temperatures and gusty cold winds.
Yeah, if you're in West,
I remember that.
If you're in the Midwest right now, it's back. So
it's back again. She said, I stayed inside those days running on the tread, but here are my concerns. Number one, I can't run as fast. My stride feels shortened.
Me too.
Number two, when I do run outside and return to running outside, my hips and legs feel really stiff. Again, my stride feels compromised. Can you give me some suggestions to overcome this? I eventually feel better, but it takes a few days. Are there stretches I should do? My running friend says she experiences the same thing. We are both older, mid-60s, if that matters.
That only matters insofar, Carol, as it's true for you as much as it's true for someone who's 10 years old. So that's a very common anomaly. And if I could say one general thing about it is that because that can be the case, and because that's generally the case for most people to one degree or another, the treadmill does things differently physiologically than running outside. So don't think that there's something wrong necessarily because that's happening, but instead take Andy's wisdom she's about to share with you in trying to make sure that you don't do something that could cause you harm.
I shared with Carol, and I'll share with all of you, that we recommend running based on effort all the time, but especially when we're looking at treadmill efforts and keeping the proper effort on a treadmill, because it might be surprising how much of a discrepancy there can be. And treadmills are not always tuned correctly.
Well, there is that.
There's that. But also it is different. So you're not comparing apples to apples when you're running on a treadmill versus running on a trail, which is, versus running on the road. There's so many different things.
It's not even the exact same physiological activity. The treadmill is pulling your foot backwards every time it comes down, right? The road does not do that. As a matter of fact, the road's almost the opposite kind of force, where think about it in terms of like the road pushes against you when your foot hits the ground, especially if you heel strike at all. On a treadmill, because that's not happening, the actual force, impact forces, and the functional movement forces are very different. So, yes, it's not apples to apples by any means.
Yeah, and so we're going to want to make sure that we're running the proper effort. You've heard us say it, you'll hear us say it again, but that is the most important part of getting the benefit from your workout to grow your fitness. So just try as best you can to just dial in that effort. But we were talking about the stiffness that occurs, right? That was the second part of the question, this stiffness and returning back to the road. It just feels off. It feels bad, like legs feel bad. And I've experienced this as well. And a lot of it has to do, and everyone's going to be a little bit different, but there's form things involved. For me, I run more rigidly on a treadmill. Because it does feel a little like I'm not the one who's in control. Like the treadmill is controlling me. And there might be a little bit of an issue there beyond running, trying to control my environment. No, but I do run more rigidly. So meaning my shoulders are a little bit more tense. My body is just more tense. And I start to run on the front of the treadmill. I asked some clarifying questions of Carol, and she says she also runs towards the front.
Like scuffing the buffer?
Yeah. Yeah. And so all of these things being more tense on the treadmill is going to aid in that stiffness that we are discussing. But also if you're running too hard, you also might be becoming more stiff. Like if the effort isn't translating to the pace that you were hoping that it would be, and you run a little bit more aggressively than you would have, it's possible. That could also be part of it.
And because of the nature of the thing, this is a little bit tricky. So think about it in terms of if you're in the midst of training and you've been training outside, and then suddenly you go and you run on the treadmill. Let's say that your general fitness is in a decent place. Your muscle recruitment and your musculoskeletal development are reasonably strong. You go and you run on a treadmill, your body is going to be able to handle the difference in the type of exertion fairly well for quite some time before you notice that it's actually not quite, feeling as good anymore. So for instance, you could run for an hour, hour and a half, and only in the final 5 or 10 minutes start to feel like, oh, my hips are like starting to feel sore suddenly. And then you get done, and for like the next 2 days, you feel like you can hardly lift your legs without like soreness or pain or something. The reason that kind of thing can happen in a situation like that is because you are already well conditioned, but there's certain muscles that are being utilized in different ways than what they're familiar with, and it doesn't expose itself until you've already exerted quite a bit. So it's easy to overdo it on treadmills.
And we're going to give the suggestion that we always give when it comes to treadmill running is to vary the incline, because it's going to help too. If you're running at the same incline at the same pace for 2 hours for like a long run that you decided to do indoors, there's going to be some overuse stuff going on, because usually there is some other stimulation. There's other muscles that are going to be working and activated by going like uphill.
Just other variables.
There's other variables.
In your motion.
So doing the same exact step without any changes on a treadmill, we want you to vary that incline, even if it's just a little bit here and there. It's going to be helpful. And then
it's a really interesting. To that extent. Consider something like if you run on roads regularly, and roads have a slant one way or another, you're routinely not running on totally flat surfaces, and then you go to running on a totally flat surface for long periods of time. One of the things that people tend to notice when they're doing long periods of treadmill running is like foot pain on one side or another of their foot, whether like arch pain or like naviculars on the outside of their foot. Is the cuboid? Which one's on the out? Anyway, cuboid or navicular pain on the outside of your foot. And so when things like that are happening, it's often because your foot is impacting in the exact same way over and over without any variations, any fluctuations. Whereas when you're running outside, you have like a slant going one direction, and then hopefully you're not running on the same side of the road on that slant for 2 hours, because then that's where a lot of people have like, hip pains or something starting to crop up. All of it points to the same thing. When you have minimal fluctuation on a running surface for long periods of time, you tend to have overuse or strain related problems. Just par for the course. That's to be expected. So varying what you're doing on the treadmill matters a lot.
And going back to my point of being really rigid, a lot of people don't use the little emergency clip. I have found that I do use the emergency clip because it gives me some peace of mind.
You do use it?
I do use it.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I use the emergency clip.
So when I like cut it off and put it somewhere else, that bothers you?
Did you do that to our new treadmill? Oh dear. Well, I use it. I don't know why people don't, because
when I use it, I'm constantly bumping it and shutting the treadmill off right in the middle of a run, and I like hit the front of the thing because I'm not ready for it.
Yeah, that's happened, I guess. But I've also, true story, I have fallen on a treadmill.
On her face?
Yes.
Like face to treadmill?
Tender age of 12, at the most
That's
embarrassing
exactly the right
point of your
time to
life,
have facial
in front of friends. I had
wounds.
a scrape on my face.
So anyway,
was that how old I was? I don't know. It was in that age range. It was like between 6th and 7th grade.
You were young enough that you could call it battle wounds, and all the boys would think it's cool.
No. They were all there. Everyone saw me fall. You want to know
That's
why,
only because
too?
all your friends are runners.
This is like the literal translation of pride comes before the fall, because I was showing off because I was running 6-minute pace on it.
Don't show off. No way. You never show
I
off.
didn't even know what pace was, really, because I didn't know.
Like what miles per hour means?
You know what? When I was a kid, we didn't time stuff because we like.
Yeah, because you're in middle school.
Also like we had these little Timex and we didn't know exact distances outside. Yeah. So I didn't
for
really
the
know
days.
unless I was like,
for the days when GPS watches didn't even exist.
that's a whole nother story. But
Yep.
the story of me falling and I skidded up my face. So the treadmill kept moving and skidded up my face, and I had scabs on my face.
As
and
treadmills are prone to do.
It was difficult time for me. So that is why
So
I put a
what's
clip
the-
on. I put a clip on because then it will at least stop.
Okay. So anyway,
Give you some peace of mind, and hopefully you can relax your arms.
was there a second point to
Relax. Yes, well, that's the part, like relaxing,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and that can help if you have a little bit of peace of mind. Clip
Yep.
that on, and then relax your shoulders, bring your arms down, and think about how your body is positioned, and if you are in a different position than you normally are outside, because sometimes the treadmill will cause this because it's just different to
Well, like, yeah, you don't have natural wind resistance, and that, when we're not running fast, that doesn't amount to much, but it does seem to change our instinctual torso position on a treadmill versus when we're running outside. Like, people almost want to kind of like sit back a bit, partly because you're so close to this thing in front of you, and your subconscious is trying to avoid running into that little deck that's right in front of you. But anyway, be mindful for sure.
And so she asked too, like, what can I do about this stiffness? And we're big advocates for Wharton mobility routine. And we have a video, and we can also link to the book, Phil Wharton's book. And it's really going to help through your joints. So if you're feeling it in your hips, I'm one who's had a lot of hip stiffness and injury. So Wharton mobility has been my go-to. But not only doing the routine afterwards, but like doing some things before. So making sure you're doing a good warm up before you get on a treadmill. A lot of people do less before they hop on a treadmill than they do outside. They also will ramp up faster on a treadmill than letting themselves naturally get into a run outdoors. And I think that's because we are we're able to control more of the settings on there. So
many things I could say about that.
The warming up piece, like don't skip the warm up even though you're inside. And it might be warm in the room or the gym. Still do the stuff. So that's part of what I wanted to mention was the Wharton mobility routine, and specifically, doing the hamstring and the quad stretches through that hip if the hip stiffness is a major concern. And then also the hurdling pigeon combo. That's come up a couple of times recently as being just a really good exercise to not only stretch out your hip girdle, but also do some activation before running. So I'll link to the hurdling pigeon combo as well. There are so many that I could say right now. I could do a whole episode on that, but that's a good place to start.
But we're not going to say all of them.
I'm not going to say all of them.
Good. All right. Well, thank you, Carol, for the question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Next question from Jeremy in Michigan. And this one was actually an interesting conversation because as the question came in and I shared some thoughts, asked for some more details, it kind of morphed a bit, which is important because when you're seeking to get to the heart of a thing, especially a problem that you may be experiencing, oftentimes there's more beneath the surface than what's immediately manifesting. So here's a good example of that. Jeremy began by asking, do you have any alternatives for the supine planks? We were recommending a core routine that included supine planks, which is when you're facing the sky. That's what supine means. So you're on your back. Well, really you're on your elbows and your heels. And if you're not familiar with that, look that one up. That's a good one for hamstrings and low back work. Actually, it's thoracic, so it's kind of more mid-back. But anyway, so supine planks. But they were hurting his knee. He said, I'm finding them difficult. On one side in particular, feeling instability and like minor discomfort. So it wasn't like pain, like poignant pain, but it was like, this doesn't feel right. He said almost like it's going to pop, but doesn't.
Ooh.
Okay, so that's not good.
No.
That kind of a sensation often, by the way, is indicative of things like potentially like hypermobility in a joint or...
Or is that tracking? The knee isn't tracking.
Maybe, but it has to do with the knee joint specifically as having something unstable, as he expressed, and that can be dangerous. So that was it. But then he goes on to say, well, I've been using some over-the-counter orthotics in my shoes recently when I'm not running, just like walking around work and stuff like that. And that seems to be actually helping the way it's feeling in general. But but not and then when he goes to do the supine planks, the feeling comes back. So it's like that knee has caused him problems in more contexts, but the supine plank specifically was making it worse. Okay, so that's an interesting question, because as we start to interact, it's like there's something more going on here, because why would an orthotic in one shoe, he's not wearing the same orthotic in both.
Oh, he's not?
No, one shoe. Okay, so why would putting an orthotic in one shoe? Well, as we got to talking more, turns out Jeremy also has a leg length discrepancy, which is why the orthotic in one shoe, because it's lifting the shorter leg, right? And that makes sense then, alleviating some pressures potentially on the knee and or the hip. And so we started to interact a bit, and he's like, well, I've got this back thing, and that might be related. And we start talking, and it's like, okay, first of all, leg length discrepancy, if it is not a literal difference in like bone length, structural length, which sometimes it is often a hip or low back problem where there's a misalignment. And so your hip alignment is off, which means one leg is extending down a little bit further than the other, or in your low back, spine curvature is a bit off, which can cause a hip misalignment then. So we started just basically kind of tracing the problem. And it's like, okay, so you've got this knee thing, but your hips are kind of this way, but then really your low back. And so he started talking about how he's pursued this in the past, and he's aware that there is an issue there, and has not necessarily resolved it fully. So that's where I say, like, we're trying to really get to the heart of the thing. If we were to just focus on, you just need to do a different exercise that doesn't bother your knee, that would help in the immediate. And by the way, I have a couple alternatives, and I'll share them in a moment. But if that's the only thing we focused on, there's potentially a problem that will continue no matter what you do in terms of addressing the knee, because the knee is likely not the source of the issue. Okay? Now, knowing all of that, first I shared with Jeremy, the supine plank is great because it helps with, like a regular plank, it's actually kind of a full postural exercise for your back and the
Posterior.
back of your kinetic chain, as opposed to the regular plank, which is the front, or side planks, which is obliques, right? So I like it for that. Now, if you can't do that, there are some alternatives. One example, and my favorite one, is the single leg bridges. If you've never done those before, that's where you do like a bridge, but then you take one knee and straighten it so that the foot is like kind of sticking up in the air. And then you do your bridges with only one foot on the ground, and you go down and back up. I really like that one. You'll feel the value of that exercise the first time you do it if you've never done it before. And so that's a good opportunity to basically, if you think about it, it's the same kind of exercise as a supine plank, but in motion, which I always prefer an exercise with motion involved in it anyway. So when I have athletes doing supine planks, I recommend that they do single leg lifts while they're doing the supine plank, which is part of why Jeremy was having the knee pain, because his one leg couldn't support him as well as the other. So that's good. But now, if let's say that still causes aggravation to the knee, because it could, there's still an exacerbation of the knee joint during that type of a motion. So then we would revert to something where the knee is no longer flexing at all, sustaining your weight. And that would be like go on your belly and do Supermans or Australian crawls, some of those types of things. I don't know why it's called an Australian crawl, but it's the one where you like kick your legs like you're swimming and you extend your hands one at a time.
Because people swim a lot in Australia. There's
Do
lots
they?
of good beach.
I mean, I wouldn't know, except that's cool. But all right, now, that being the case, there's more going on here. Trace it all the way back and say, okay, there could be a back source problem. And that's where I started to suggest, really, it would be good to cut out the thing that's bothering you. If you're ever doing an exercise routine or strength or mobility work and something is aggravating a location, don't do the thing. If it's aggravating it, don't do it. But immediately start to pursue, why is this a problem? Because just simply avoiding the thing that's aggravating an issue doesn't do anything to solve the problem usually. So pursue that further, Jeremy. Look into the low back and or hip related stuff. And as we suggested with the previous asker of questions, we would recommend taking a look at some of Wharton's material, especially because Phil Wharton himself rehabilitated scoliosis via their work.
Severe
scoliosis, and now like runs at a not young age anymore and is good. So a place to start.
Andrea from Michigan asked a great question that follows along with our previous conversations about toughness.
Yeah.
Andrea asked, how do you help yourself power through a tough workout?
I take Nike's quote and I tattoo it to the inside of my eyes. And so all I see is the words, just do it.
Ha, 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 ha. All right. I love this question.
Oh.
I'm just going to glaze over that. I really just don't know what to say. I love the question. A couple of tricks that I've acquired. Looking up. You've heard me say this as a form tip and a mental trick. Do it. Look up.
Look at the stars.
No, not all the way up.
And you
forward.
Shoot for the moon.
No, forward. Okay, so like, let's say, okay, just above straight.
Run with tall people. And watch where they're. Anyway, can I at least address that there's a counterintuitive element to the question? Because she's asking, how can we power through a tough workout? And of course, chances are we're going to tell you don't. If you are one of our athletes and you're asking, how do I grind through this? And that's not the way you should train. But let's assume that you are training intuitively and you are running a smart effort for the day and the type of effort. And there are definitely moments where it's like, this is a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's not because
uncomfortable.
It's not because I'm overdoing or
Right.
overstraining. It's just, sometimes you're running hard it's
hard.
not easy.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
we'll assume that.
We'll
We'll give you the benefit of the doubt, Andrea.
I actually really like this question because I think I've mentioned recently that I have gotten back into doing steady states and fartleks for the first time in 2 years. And so being uncomfortable.
Year and a half. I mean, first time in a year and a half.
No, I think it was been longer.
No, it's 2021
Okay,
summer.
well,
Yeah. Anyway,
I hadn't run hard for a long time. And so even just a steady effort, a gentle steady, being uncomfortable at all was difficult for me. So these are some things that I have used even recently in order to help me stay engaged. So I'm going to call these more focused techniques than anything else. But the first one, look up. And both the postural benefit, so that's going to bring up your shoulders. It's going to help you activate your core. It's going to keep your hips in the right place because your core is going to be engaged. Looking up, the whole body follows. And often, this is the visualization piece, I will imagine a finish line, whether that's a finish line that I've had in the past that was successful or it's one that I'm looking forward to in the future, just some sort of like visualization.
it's literally the one that she's approaching down the way.
Yeah. So the second one is relaxing my face and even forcing a smile sometimes. So if I'm feeling
It
myself.
looks so funny.
I know, it does kind of
It
look funny.
looks so
the
goofy.
pictures are so funny. But I will force myself to smile if I feel myself start to grimace or if I feel that I'm like starting to tighten up maybe a little bit, or genuinely I am happy sometimes during races because I really have fun. So sometimes
As long as her husband isn't there not cheering loudly enough. That seems to cause problems.
Goodness gracious. Okay, so smiling can be helpful. It can be a technique. There is research behind smiling and the signals that it sends to the brain. It can work both ways. So that is a good thing to think about, especially if you're one to grimace and wear whatever's going on in your mind on your face. Then relax your shoulders and keep your arms about hip level. I had mentioned this for the treadmill running suggestion as well, but relaxing your shoulders can really help you with your whole form, but also it helps you relax and breathe better and keeps you, we discussed about this toughness, like, your amygdala, if it's lit up, if it's like fight or flight, if you're able to take a second, take a beat, relax your body, relax your shoulders, you're able to think better. And instead of reacting, you're going to be responding to what's happening in this workout. Another thing that I do is I choose one form objective at a time, just one. We're not going to do everything all at once, just one thing.
Tilt your big toe.
Well, sometimes I do think lead with your big toe because sometimes I supinate. So I'll think lead with your big toe. That will be one of my form objectives. So thank you, Zach.
Look at
you
Andy just turned my joke into a reality. All right.
Yeah. Another one is like pick up your heels. Which is interesting because it seems so simple, like picking up your heels, but in fact, it helps your form quite a bit because it helps straighten out your knee if you have any crooked knee things going on, or if you swing your heels out, like if you swing your feet out, if you've noticed that as part of your form when you get tired.
Which usually means that you have hip weakness, by the way.
It helps you straighten that out as well. And another one might be quick and relaxed. Eyes up, as I mentioned earlier. Use your feet, drive the knee. That's when
Forearm angles.
Forearm
angles.
There's some of you who know that.
Use your eyes, left and right, left and right.
Zach's making some jokes. But yeah, those are really great. And that's when you zoom in. When I talked about visualization, that's zooming out. So you can do both strategies within a run and you can change in between them. But if something's not working, let's say that you're diving into some sort of detail and that starts to become monotonous for you, or that's not working anymore, then zoom out and do the visualization. Okay, those are a couple strategies you can use. And if I'm not thinking about the things above, all those things that I just mentioned to you about form, I'm thinking a mantra. Like, you're here for this. Andy, you are strong. Find a way. That one's from Nate Martin. Find a way.
You do a lot of thinking while you run.
I like to plan what I think because not in easy runs. I like to let my mind wander. I like to be creative and brainstorm and all of that. But when I'm doing a harder effort, like Andrea's mentioning, I do like to have strategies and I like to practice them because I think it helps me in my race. I don't let my mind just go anywhere. I try to create kind of a you know how we have race plans? It's like a race plan for your brain. And I think that it's been very, very helpful. Another thing that is often suggested, and I have used before, is breaking the run into mental segments. So even if that is just, okay, I'm running to that next mailbox, and then this is the turnaround. I'm on my way home. Like, those kinds of mental segments can work as well, even though they're more vague. Or if you're in a race, you can research beforehand and know where each 5K is, or if it's a marathon where, you know, each 10K is, you know, where the final 10K turn is. So, you know, like, I can do anything for this amount of time. I can do anything for 10 minutes. I can do anything, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do as far as segments go. And then finally, this one's kind of obscure and it's kind of something that is hard to understand. So I'll do my best. I try not to strive too hard in front of me. Sometimes when I am...
You like to run backwards.
No, I'm like power. So
you like to run in place.
The word that Andrew uses, like power through a workout. Like if I am like striving, like I'm trying to grab, like reaching, and I'm like grabbing onto what's in front of me, I feel worse. And typically I even if I'm not running any faster, but I have that kind of attitude, like when I look back later, the miles in my study that I was the most relaxed are usually my fastest. So if I can relax and not strive too hard in front of me, I imagine I'm right in the groove, not ahead, not behind, and I make sure that I don't push myself beyond so that I'm not overdoing it. And I tell myself, Andy, you're in control. And I remind myself that what I'm doing is manageable. And if it's not, I just adjust it so that it is.
That's good. It should be noted, as we're thinking about things like reaching and the concept there too, that you in training are trying to essentially, one of the elements of training is to prepare yourself to be comfortable at a given effort in a race, right? And so with however much time you have to train, you're trying to get comfortable with a greater and greater output as a result of the effort. And so in order to accomplish that, then you strive for trying to implement the Goldilocks zone of struggle in these types of moments where you're not reaching, but you're right on the edge of it.
The bubble, Zach, the bubble.
You're close to it. Exactly. You're close to it. But if you are reaching in training on a regular basis, you are running the risk of straining and overstressing your system. It is just really, really easy to overstress our systems. And as a result, it is more effective to understress long-term than overstress. And so find that kind of like the comfortable, uncomfortable position. And we call it reasonably uncomfortable. And that's going to be, it's not going to be the same every day. And so the idea of like powering through, don't look for a result. Don't look for a for numbers or objective qualifiers to suggest that you are effective in your workout, but instead just look for feeling like you're in the right groove, in the right place there, and using Andy's tips and advice to help you feel comfortable in that reasonably uncomfortable effort.
Yeah. And one more thing that I do, talking about zooming in and zooming out, I zoom out, and I've mentioned that I use a lot of my runs as kind of a time of worship to God. It's part of my spiritual journey. And so something I do when I zoom out is I just think about how I'm part of this big wide world and all of this creation, and I use running to be part of that. So that's just a personal note from me, something that I do when I zoom out. And again, zooming in is when you think about a detail. So driving your knee, pumping your arms. Zooming out is when you visualize and take yourself kind of out of your current stress.
As Magnus wrote about to a substantial degree in that book, Do Hard Things. It's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that question as well, Andrea. Okay, well, the last question here is going to be a technical question, and I really like these. It's also a little bit briefer because we don't have a ton of details here to share with you, partly because you might not want to hear tons and tons of tech specs details. But if you do want to look it up, we'll give you kind of the concepts to pursue. So here's the question from Haley from Michigan, talking about GPS watches. And she writes, with Garmin specifically, which GPS setting tends to be the most reliable? What is the difference between them? Does it matter which setting is being used? That's an interesting question. We appreciate the question, Haley, because it can matter, and there certainly are differences. But what are those differences, and does that then change what I use for some reason? So what she's talking about is there are three. She used the term GPS like Kleenex, right? GPS is one type of GNSS. I would love to tell you what those letters stand for, but I don't really know. Global Navigating something. So I'm sure the word satellite's in there. So GNSSs are satellite networks that help with global positioning. The GPS network is the United States version of a GNSS and has coined the phrase because it was the first global positioning satellite system, right? So that's GPS is one. You're going to see that on your watch. GLONASS, if that's how you say it, is another. That's Russia's version of a satellite network. And then the newest is Galileo, and that's the European Union's version of the satellite network. So in concept, your watch, chances are, has a number of those, if not all of them, as options for choosing your GPS settings. Usually you have the choice of choosing like one or another or combinations. I don't know how many watches now can choose all three, but some can. So you can connect to all the satellites in the universe, theoretically.
The universe.
So, yes.
But
but
for the secret spy ones.
well, that's actually been part of the problem.
Oh, yeah?
In fact, yeah, because here's how it works. They claim, we don't know. We don't know if governments are telling the truth or not with these kinds of things. But like the United States, for instance, the GPS network has been up since the 80s. I think that was actually part of, well, anyway, I don't know. It was part of Reagan's big thing with the Star Wars stuff. Oh. So GPS has been around for a while, and it certainly was the first large scale available. But when it was first constructed, and this is true with Galileo as well for European Union, there's like a degree of precision that the world has access to, and then there's a degree of precision that like the military has access to. And so it's the same network, so they claim, but we don't necessarily get the most accurate access. Now,
interesting.
In the 90s, in the 90s, the U.S. government signed into law something that disband that. They call it selective accuracy or something. And so apparently that's not true anymore for GPS network. Now civilians are accessing the same degree of accuracy as the military. I don't know if that's true. Really, that's not the point.
That's not the point.
But
no conspiracy theories, Zach.
Those were all things that were like transparent. I'm just saying I have no idea what's really going on behind the scenes. But I do know that your watch is going to let you pick them, and so it's not bad to know what are the differences and doesn't matter. So the first answer there is the GPS network. The United States version has more satellites than all the other ones by itself, about 50% more or so. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything for GPS accuracy. It does mean coverage is better, like globally. So there are going to be areas in the world where your GPS network is going to have more coverage than a Galileo network, for instance, which, by the way, Galileo being focused on European Union is more concentrated around one part of the world than others. So there is that. However, it doesn't take that many satellites to establish clear and reliable connection either. And so as a result, just because there's more in the sky doesn't mean it's going to make a difference. Galileo is newest among the three and claims to be the most precise. If you were to say, okay, GPS claims precision down to 3 meters, Galileo claims down to 1 meter, no one has proven beyond all doubt that either of those are true and that there's any real measurable difference between the two. Or at least if they've proven that, it's not public knowledge that's easily accessible. So what I'm saying here is you could theoretically find a difference. So one day you could be on GPS, another day on Galileo, and have vast degrees of difference in accuracy running on the same course. That's possible. It's rarely predictable unless there are like an app that you can look at that shows you where the satellites are above you in space, like at any given moment in time. I know, it's really cool. So you can look at it and say, wow, there's 30 satellites above me and half of them are Galileo and half are GPS. So I should connect to both of them, right? Because then I get all the satellite access, potentially. And that may be true. So the one advice that on a Garmin forum that someone gives is, well, you should just check that app every day before you run. It's like, well, who wants to check the location of satellites?
Have them all selected?
Yes,
what's
but here's the
difficulty?
problem.
Yeah.
The more networks you're connected to, the faster it drains your battery. And that is why people don't like connecting to.
I was like, there has to be a
There's a
holdup
catch.
because you might as well just.
There's a catch.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess if you're looking for the most reliable, then the answer is really it depends on where you are and when you are, because where the satellites are in that given moment. They don't just sit in the same spot. Well, okay, there's a long story about geosynchronous orbits and stuff, but the point is the exact configuration of satellites above you is not the same every day, all day. So if that's true, then you have two options here. You either pursue the accuracy and reliability to whatever degree it takes, or you don't care. Because
I knew you were going to say that. Stop. Just don't care.
Because what's the point in all of this,
gosh.
right? Here's the point. I'm going to give it to you. Did you run the prescribed effort for the intended duration and feel good respective to the purpose of the run? And if you did, why does it matter if a satellite skips you all around the course?
Sometimes some of us use GPS to find where we're going. Just putting
now,
that out
that's
there.
different because in that instance, that's not the concern, because we're talking about the difference of
watches.
like 5 to 10 meters of accuracy or tracking, or if it's going to refresh every half second or every 2 or 3 seconds, things like that. Okay. So there's lots of things available to you in terms of technology to help you know, like, how many satellites am I connected to right now and how high is their signal strength. Yeah. Like you can find that stuff if you really want to know.
It's just annoying when things are wrong, Zach. It's just annoying.
But
it's
it doesn't,
annoying.
but it doesn't matter
because
because
you can fix that
no. I'm
annoyance.
saying in terms of like, if you're concerned about it, it doesn't matter, because the only way that you can address that thoroughly is if you pay really close attention to it and devote a fair amount of time and effort to knowing the precise details every time you run. Mm-hmm. And nobody out there wants to do that. So my answer to you, Haley, is either, I will say this, in general, GPS and Galileo tends to have better results at the current moment if there are noticeable differences versus GPS and GLONASS. But that still depends on where you are in the world, or where you are even, versus like cities, country, mountains, terrain.
Well, before Zach gives us more technical information, we're going to get on to the world of running. Kicking off our world of running, we had a great performance from Mary. She ran a 5K and was first in age group.
Well done.
Well done. Wasn't even the main goal, and she did great.
Not even close to the main goal. This was like, I'm just going to jump in and see kind of how I'm doing.
Yeah.
And she's doing great.
Doing great.
Good work, Mary.
Speaking of
great, we have so many fast things to tell you about right now. We're going to do it kind of in blitz fashion here, because it would take way too long for us to go into the full depth of everything that has just happened in the last few days.
Yeah, so we apologize in advance for not being able to share every single good performance.
Yes, and we'll contextualize as best we can so you understand what's going on in the in the sport here. But there's just so many good things. All right, so Woody Kincaid Let's start it off there. Woody Kincaid, previously of Bowerman Track Club. He is not with the club anymore. There's a lot going on there. But point is, he just ran a new American indoor 5,000-meter record. Not even a year since Grant Fisher broke that record with what was like a landmark performance.
Yeah.
Woody Kincaid breaks it further. He dropped like 2 seconds off of Grant Fisher's time and runs what is now the 4th fastest indoor 5,000 meter in the world ever. 12:51. Whoa.
Yeah. The names ahead of him: Kenenisa Bekele, Haile Gebrselassie, and Daniel Komen. So
who are all like the best of their time as
Best.
well. We should mention all 3 of them were the best of their time.
Yeah.
So that Woody Kincaid, what a boss.
What a
That was
boss.
just and I love watching Woody Kincaid race because like if he's feeling it in the last like 400 meters or so, nobody can beat him.
His
The dude
kick.
is savage.
his
It's
kicks
something.
are insane.
I love it.
To give you specifics, he ran a 26.27 final lap.
Okay. That's
What?
quick.
That is so fast.
That's good.
And we should be giving major props to Joe Klecker, who did the
Also
work
of the USA.
in this race.
Yeah, Joe
And
Klecker.
He ran awesome too. So
Of
Woody
On
just-
Athletics Club.
On Athletics
Yeah, give a
Club.
shout out.
And Olympian, of course. Let's Run wrote, this time last year, no American had ever run 12:51 indoors or out.
Yeah.
And then look where we are now.
Yeah,
it's
something.
incredible.
So Joe Klecker, by the way, ended up in 12:54.99. So he got that hair hundredth under 12:55, which amounts to the 3rd fastest 5,000 meter indoors by an American.
Okay.
And previous to Grant Fisher's time last year, that would have been the record. Also, then marks him as the 11th American. Period. Under 13 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's just
Number 4 on the
impressive
combined U.S. indoor-outdoor list. So, yeah.
So good. So good.
Joe Klecker.
We love it. Okay, next up is Yared Nuguse.
More records.
More records and more on Athletics Club
Yes.
prowess. Oh, we should have said this earlier. Basically, this is just like all things on Athletics Club for a little while.
OAC show.
They just like put on a clinic this
so
weekend.
Cool. Yeah.
We'll come back to that. Okay,
And
Yared.
Yared Nuguse was on our show. You'll
He
remember.
was. It's true.
Last year. And so we were eager to see how he would do joining on, because this is his first year with
First
on.
full year, yeah.
He broke the 10-year-old record held by Galen Rupp in the 3,000 meter indoor run.
Nice.
Yes. And he ran the time of 7:28.24.
7:20. That is faster than Grant Fisher's outdoor 3,000 meter record, which that
Insanely
matters
fast.
because outdoor records are almost always faster than indoor records.
The photo of him finishing, it's like the person's so blurry behind him that I can't figure out who it is. Well, no, I know because I could see the results.
Depth of
But I mean,
field.
in the picture, it's like him, like
Oh, yeah. It's
with
good.
daylight after him. So yeah, we did want to mention the fact that he was faster than the outdoor time that Grant Fisher set last summer in Monaco, and then Sam Atkin, unsponsored
of
a year
Great Britain.
ago,
Yep.
ran 7:31.97 to break
Whoa.
Mo Farah's British record.
The king himself.
Yeah, and it was faster than Mo Farah's outdoor record.
That's
too.
amazing. That's
So
wow.
Sam Atkin.
Was he second in the race? We don't
I
have it listed
believe
on here.
so.
He must have been. He must have been.
I didn't have the full
Well,
list
anyway.
here.
Okay, so Sam Atkin breaks
This is
the
not where
British
this
record.
ends, okay? There's
Yared
more
Nuguse breaks the
exciting
American
things.
record. But check it out. Next up is Drew Bosley, who's a collegian running for Northern Arizona University. Broke Yared Nuguse's NCAA record
Yep,
in that
from
same
last
race
year.
from last year,
I
running
think it
7:30.
was.
I think it was too.
Because
yeah.
he was in. Remember?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Then he qualified for the Olympics.
I
Yeah,
remember.
the whole thing.
So Drew Bosley runs 7:36, a new NCAA record in the same race that Yared Nuguse, who held that record previously, breaks
like
the American
poetic.
record.
It's
Isn't
so
that something?
poetic.
But get this. Add another layer, because not far behind him was Hobbs Kessler, the young phenom at under 20 years of age. He's 19 years old, ran 7:39 for what as far as we can tell, we've been looking this up, trying to figure it out because no one reported this.
Right.
As apparently it's a new junior record, a U20 record for the USA in the 3,000 meters, beating a 2009 record, beating Galen Rupp's best U20 time, Grant Fisher's best U20 time. All these legends. Hobbs Kessler didn't just beat him; he's 8 seconds faster
That's so
than the next best.
amazing.
Whoa.
Just insane. So people were not talking about Hobbs as much as they should have been.
They should have been.
They should have been. So I
Listen,
want to
I mean, with
validate
his
that, but no one
1500
else
time,
has said that. But it is. We did our research.
With his 1500 time and that 3000 meter time, Hobbs Kessler is a dead threat.
He is.
And he's 19. So if he can just
So cool.
hold momentum for like 10 years, oh man.
For 10 years, for a decade.
All right.
Yeah. Number 3.
More records.
North American record for a Canadian in the 1000. Lucia Stafford ran a new North American record time in the 1000 of 2:33.75.
That's quick.
It's the 9th fastest time in world history, Zach.
Oh my.
So
That's very quick.
Yes, it's very quick. And only 2 women in the last 15 years have run faster than Stafford in the indoor 1000. And that was Laura Muir of Great Britain.
Yep.
And then we have Genzeme Dibaba. So you know these names as legends in our sport. And her sister is Gabriella Dupuis Stafford. I didn't realize
family
there's like this
speed.
family thing going on, and you'll know her because she has the she has records from last year. She was breaking the Canadian records in which is
5,000.
5,000.
She broke the 5,000. I don't know, something else. Yeah.
Anyway, so family speed we've got going on here, and Lucia was shooting for the Canadian record of 2:37. So she ran way
That's
under
a lot
that.
faster.
Yeah,
that's like just when
more than 4 seconds.
when you're
faster than
having
our
a
goal.
good day and you just take full advantage.
And that's what she said. She's like, everything clicked today. She's like, I know it won't click like this every single time I race, so I'm really trying to soak it in.
But apparently it clicked for every single person at that meet.
There's something
what
magical going on.
What it sounded like.
She beat her nearest competitor by 3 seconds.
Wow, she won it handily.
Mm-hmm.
That must have just looked awesome. Okay, so next up here is just a list of honorable mentions because
Nope, not other honorable mentions. They're other major news.
I mean, they're just
we
other
can't even-
yeah. Okay.
Can I give this next
Yeah,
one?
of course.
Oh, I love Ajay Wilson. 17 straight wins at the Armory for Ajay Wilson.
So
17.
if you have to assume she's only running at the Armory once or twice a year usually, so we're talking about like a decade of not losing every time she's on that track.
She
amazing.
is so boss. She's just so awesome.
Yeah.
So she was the champion in the 1000 over Sage Herta Klecker. So Sage
Joe
Herta,
Klecker's
married,
wife,
yep,
also of On Athletics Club, which
Yep.
might be part of the reason why they ended up together. Yeah.
Maybe.
Nice work, Dathan.
You want to give the next one?
Oh, yeah. And so we've got now, jumping across the pond, Keely Hodgkinson of England just set a new world best 600-meter time, beating, by the way, a 2004 record, a 19-year-old record, by 0.03 of a second.
So barely.
That was Russia's Olga Kotylyarova. So now I should mention that this is also the first time she's ever run 600 meters.
Right, and what did she say about
break
it?
the world best. Oh, she says, I expected to break the world record. Listen,
I love that.
Keely Hodgkinson is the epitome of where when confidence and arrogance are hard to decipher between the two.
No, I think
she
she's
is
super confident.
Have you heard her interviews? It's hard to tell whether she is
character
arrogant
judgments on
or
this show.
just confident. Either way, she knows that she's going to do it, and she does it.
Well,
That's cool.
she did it.
She did
so.
it. All right. Well, okay.
That's
Go
so
ahead,
exciting.
Andy. You take
yeah,
the next
okay.
one.
NC State's Caitlin Toohey
Caitlin Toohey.
ran a new NCAA record in the mile, which is not terribly surprising, but it is.
But also not her event.
It's not her event. So the range that she has demonstrated in the last 2 years has been amazing. So she ran 4:24.26.
That's pretty quick.
That is really quick. She bested Jenny Simpson's 2009 record of 4:25.
Jenny Simpson.
I know, Jenny
who
Simpson.
also holds the 5,000 record, and everyone says Caitlin Toohey's going to break that one too.
Okay, well.
Just going to clear Simpson off the record board.
Well, Simpson's coming back.
Yeah.
She's in the half now. Okay, incredible performance in context. How many great U.S. milers went through the NCAA in the interim?
Yeah, so we're talking about 2009 when Jenny Simpson set the record, and there have been like dozens of incredible U.S. milers who didn't break that record.
Right.
And Caitlin Toohey, who's not a miler, breaks that record. So she's just
it's
one
exciting.
special runner.
That's just putting in perspective how great it was.
All right. Speaking of greatness, the last one on our list here is University of Washington, who we should mention, they're kind of known currently to be a miler powerhouse. They attract fast milers for some reason. It's been going on for a few years now, quite a while now. So University of Washington runs like all their guys in one race. And it wasn't like one of those races that we're talking about here. They just kind of did their own race at their school. I think it was at their school. But and of their milers, 8 men in one race at the same time all ran under 4 minutes in the mile. 8 on the same team. These guys are all University of Washington. 5 of those 8 ran under 3:54.
I'm laughing because it just seems so unbelievable.
How is this
but
possible?
It is.
So check this out. Joe Wascom won it for the group and the race in a 3:51.9, third fastest NCAA time ever. Next up was Brian Fay in 3:52 flat in the 5th fastest NCAA time ever. Then Nathan Green in 3:52.76 for the 7th fastest NCAA time ever. And that was only the first 3 of them. So top 7 all time, and they put 3 guys into it in one race.
That's huge. It's huge.
Whoa. All right, so now let me say this. I have to apply the caveat because I'm a cynic and I'm constantly critical of everything. Also, because these things do happen on occasion. And just because those 8 guys did that in that race does not necessarily mean that those are going to be like the fastest milers in the country anytime they're out and racing. Something happens in these kinds of experiences where like it's like the jive is on. They've got their whole crew there together and they're just cranking it out, and something happens. Yeah, there's a kind of magic sometimes in these moments. And there's always the potentiality that not one of those guys will repeat that performance again in his career. However, there's a good chance that they will. And so, especially because some of them have run similar close times to that already. They're already great milers. So that was just really exciting to see, and just tells you like the NCAA is just hot right now, and it's going to be
so great.
So
we love track. We love indoor track. We love road racing. We love it all.
We just like running,
and
we like talking about running.
Yeah, and that's why we're here on the show. We're so glad that you've joined us today, and you've put us in your ears.
The other reason why we're here on the show is because we want to help you. And so sometimes our words in your ears is helpful, but other times you need a little bit more than that. And we do offer more than that. So if you're looking for support services more directly, more personally to you and your needs, check out our options. We do custom training plans, we do full coaching service, and we do one-off consultations if you just want to talk to a coach about your situation. So you can find all of that kind of stuff at AtoZrunning.com/coaching.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.